My name is Alice Chen, and at 25, I was proud of what I'd accomplished. The shop wasn't just a business, it was a dream come true. Grandma Rose had always encouraged my love of books, spending countless hours reading with me in her cozy living room. When she passed away 3 years ago, leaving me $50,000, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it. The bell above the door chimed, pulling me from my thoughts. Jake, my cousin, strolled in with his usual air of superiority. At 32, he was the successful one in the family, working at some fancy consulting firm in the city. He'd always looked down on my little hobby, as he called it. Well, he said, running his finger along the shelf and checking for dust. Still hanging on, I see. I straightened my spine, forcing a polite smile. What brings you here, Jake? Finally ready to pick up a book. He laughed, but there was no warmth in it. Actually, I have some news. You might want to sit down for this. Something in his tone made my stomach twist. I remained standing, gripping the counter's edge. I'm fine right here. Sit yourself, he shrugged, pulling an envelope from his designer jacket. Remember the empty building across the street? Well, say hello to its new owner. My blood ran cold as I scanned the purchase agreement he laid on the counter. Jake had bought the property, and for far more than it was worth. You bought a building? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Didn't know real estate was your thing. His smile widened, reminding me of a shark. Oh, it's not just the building, Alice. I'm opening my own bookstore. Premium books and cafe. It's going to revolutionize this sleepy little street. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. A bookstore. You've never shown any interest in books. Why would you? Why? He cut me off, leaning across the counter. Because I can. Because it's time someone showed you what real business looks like. This little fairy tale you've been living, it's over. The pieces clicked into place. Jake had always resented that Grandma Rose left me the money instead of him. He called it a waste at the time, saying I'd just squander it on my childish dreams. This is about the inheritance, isn't it? I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He straightened up, adjusting his tie. This is about business, dear cousin, pure and simple. In 6 months, Premium Books and Cafe will open its doors. We'll have everything, state-of-the-art facilities, a gourmet coffee bar, reading spaces designed by top architects. Face it, Alice, your pathetic little shop won't stand a chance. My customers are loyal, I said, but even to my ears, it sounded weak. Jake laughed, the sound echoing through my carefully curated shelves. Loyal? Please, wait until they see what I'm offering. Premium membership programs, exclusive events, author signings. I've got connections you couldn't dream of. He walked to the door, then turned back with that same shark-like smile. You know what the best part is? I'm using Grandma's old recipes for the cafe's pastries. Remember how she always said they should be shared? Well, now they will be, just not by you. That was the final straw. Grandma Rose's recipes were sacred. She taught me to bake using those handwritten cards, spending countless Sunday afternoons covered in flour and laughter. The fact that Jake would use them against me made my blood boil. But I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing my anger. Instead, I smiled, channeling all the strength I could muster. We'll see about that, Jake. Your pathetic little shop is done, Alice. He called over his shoulder as he left. Time to accept that you're not cut out for business. As the door closed behind him, I sank into my chair, my hands shaking. Jake had resources I couldn't match, connections I didn't have. And now he was wielding Grandma's recipes like a weapon. How could I possibly compete? But as I sat there, surrounded by the books I loved, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was personal. Jake thought he could waltz in and destroy everything I built, using our grandmother's legacy against me. He had no idea what he just started. I opened my laptop and started researching. If Jake wanted to play hardball, fine. But I wasn't going down without a fight. First, I needed to understand exactly what I was up against. Over the next few weeks, I watched as construction crews transformed the building across the street. Every morning brought new changes, sleek modern fixtures, huge windows, elegant signage. Jake wasn't kidding about sparing no expense. Meanwhile, I was burning the midnight oil, analyzing every aspect of my business. I knew I couldn't compete with Jake's resources directly, but maybe I didn't have to. My strength had always been personal connection, knowing my customers, understanding what they loved to read, creating a space that felt like home. One evening, as I was closing up Sarah, one of my regular customers stopped by. She'd been coming to Wonderland Books since I opened, usually with her 2 kids in tow. Alice, honey, she said, concern etched on her face. I heard about that new store opening across the street. Are you going to be okay? I managed a smile, though my stomach churned. I'm working on it, Sarah. It won't be easy, but I'm not giving up. She reached across the counter and squeezed my hand. Good, because this place, it's special. My kids learn to love reading here. That matters more than fancy coffee and modern furniture. Her words stuck with me long after she left. That night, I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with possibilities. Jake was betting on luxury and status to draw people in. But what if I could offer something he couldn't buy? Something authentic, something that really mattered to the community. I spent the next month implementing changes. Not big, flashy ones like Jake's, but meaningful ones. I started a children's reading program, partnering with local schools to bring in classes for story times. I created a cozy corner for local writers to work and connect, hosting weekly workshops led by community members. But my biggest move was something Jake would never see coming. I reached out to Maria, my grandmother's best friend, who still lived in town. She had been there for all those Sunday baking sessions, had known every story behind every recipe. Of course I remember, Maria said when I visited her. Rose never wrote down the most important parts of those recipes. The little tricks, the special touches, those she kept in her heart. I spent every Sunday with Maria, learning the true secrets of Grandma Rose's baking. Not just the ingredients, but the love and care that went into each creation. Jake might have the written recipes, but he'd never understand what made them special. As Premium Books and Cafe's opening day approached, Jake became more smug than ever. He'd stop by my shop occasionally, pointing out everything he thought I was doing wrong, suggesting it wasn't too late to gracefully bow out. I let him talk, let him think he had the upper hand. Because while he was focused on crushing me, I was building something stronger than he could imagine, not just a business, but a community. The morning Premium Books and Cafe opened, I watched from my window as crowds gathered across the street. The place was impressive, I had to admit. Modern, sleek, everything perfectly curated for maximum profit. Jake had hired local news to cover the opening, and I could see him preening for the cameras, playing the role of the successful businessman bringing culture to our small town. He kept glancing at my shop, probably expecting to see me crying over my empty store. But I wasn't crying. I was baking, filling my shop with the true scent of Grandma Rose's famous cinnamon rolls, made exactly the way she taught me through Maria. The smell wafted out onto the street, turning heads even among Jake's carefully orchestrated crowd. Sarah was my first customer that morning, as always. She took one bite of a cinnamon roll and tears welled in her eyes. Alice, she whispered, this tastes just like I remember from Rose's kitchen. Word spread quickly. By lunchtime, my little shop was full of people, not just buying books, but sharing memories of my grandmother, of countless afternoons spent in her kitchen. The sense of community was palpable, warm, and real in a way that Jake's premium experience could never match. Looking across the street at Premium Books and Cafe, with its perfect lighting and artisanal coffee, I realized something important. Jake thought he was destroying my business, but he'd actually given me something invaluable. A reason to fight, to innovate, to become stronger. This wasn't the end of my story, it was just the beginning. Jake had resources, yes, but I had something he could never buy. Authenticity, community, and the true spirit of Grandma Rose's legacy. As I watched him schmoozing with his opening day crowd, I began to form a plan. A long-term strategy that would take years to execute, but would be worth every minute of patience and hard work. Jake thought he was teaching me a lesson about business. Well, I was about to teach him one about underestimating the wrong person. The next 5 years were a masterclass in patience and perseverance. While Jake focused on immediate profits and flashy marketing, I was playing a longer game. Each step was carefully planned, each move deliberate. I watched as Premium Books and Cafe cycled through employees every few months. Jake's management style was exactly what I expected, demanding, impersonal, focused solely on numbers. Meanwhile, I invested in my people. When Emily, my first full-time employee, mentioned she wanted to learn more about business operations, I mentored her personally. When Mike, our weekend clerk, struggled to pay for college, I adjusted his schedule to help him keep his scholarships. My team wasn't just staff, they were family, and that showed in how they treated our customers. The real turning point came during the third year. I was reviewing our quarterly numbers when Sarah rushed into the shop, clutching a newspaper. "Alice, have you seen this?" she asked, spreading the business section on my counter. "They're saying downtown is the next big development opportunity. Property values are expected to triple in the next few years." I had seen it. In fact, I'd been quietly preparing for this moment. While Jake had poured money into expensive renovations and premium inventory, I'd been saving every penny, building my credit, and forming relationships with local business leaders. That evening, as I closed up shop, I noticed Jake across the street, talking animatedly on his phone. His premium store was busy, but not as busy as he'd expected. The novelty had worn off, and people were starting to see through the glossy exterior. I smiled, thinking about the meeting I had scheduled for the next morning. Jake had no idea that while he was focused on competing with my bookstore, I'd been diversifying. The small coffee shop 2 doors down. I'd bought it 6 months ago when the owner retired. The art gallery next door, a partnership I'd formed with a local artist collective. I was slowly, quietly, building a network of businesses that supported each other. But my biggest move was still to come. One rainy Tuesday, Maria invited me over for tea. As we sat in her cozy kitchen, she pulled out a thick envelope. "Rose left this with me," she said, sliding it across the table. "Made me promise to give it to you when the time was right. I think that's now." Inside was a letter from my grandmother, along with documents I'd never seen before. Property deeds, investment records, and most surprisingly, shares in several local businesses, including the building where Premium Books and Cafe now stood. My hands trembled as I read my grandmother's letter. "My dearest Alice, I always knew Jake would try to compete with you one day. His father, my son, raised him to see business as a weapon, not a tool for building community. That's why I left you the money openly, but kept these investments quiet. You needed to find your own path first, to build something meaningful your own way. The building across the street, I bought it years ago, along with several others downtown. I've left them in a trust, which Maria has been managing. You're now the sole beneficiary. Use this wisely, my darling girl. Not for revenge, but for growth. Love, Grandma Rose." I looked up at Maria, who was smiling knowingly. "You knew? All this time?" She nodded. "Rose and I had many conversations about both you and Jake. She saw what was coming long before any of us did. That night, I stayed up late, reviewing everything. The trust was substantial, but more importantly, it was strategic. My grandmother hadn't just left me property, she'd left me leverage. The next morning, I asked my lawyer to review Jake's lease agreement. As I suspected, he'd been so eager to spite me that he hadn't done proper due diligence on the building's ownership. The trust's name was buried in layers of corporate paperwork. I spent the next 2 years expanding my business network. I opened a small publishing house focused on local authors, started a literary festival that brought thousands of visitors downtown, and quietly acquired more property through the trust. All the while, Jake's business was struggling. His high overhead and impersonal approach were catching up with him. He tried copying my community programs, but they felt forced, corporate. You can't fake authenticity. It was a warm spring morning when I finally decided it was time. I walked into Premium Books and Cafe, finding Jake at his massive desk in the back office. "Hello, cousin," I said, setting a folder in front of him. Your lease agreement. There are some interesting details about property ownership you seem to have missed." That got his attention. He opened the folder, his face paling as he read. This has to be a mistake. The building belongs to Northern Trust Holdings." I smiled. "Yes, it does. A trust set up by Grandma Rose, managed by Maria, and now controlled by me." "Or lying. This is some kind of trick." "No trick, Jake. Just good business." I pulled out another document. "I'm invoking Clause 23B of your lease agreement. You have 60 days to vacate the premises." "You can't do this," he sputtered. "I'll fight it. I'll sue." "You can try," I said calmly. "But first, you might want to review your company's financials. Your coffee supplier has been overcharging you for 2 years. They're owned by my publishing house now, by the way. Your premium membership program, the software company that runs it just doubled their rates. Oh, and those author events you've been advertising. Most of them have signed exclusive contracts with our literary festival." Jake sank into a nearby chair, his face ashen. How and did you? 10 years, Jake. That's how long I spent building this. While you were focused on destroying my pathetic little shop, I was creating something bigger. The difference is, I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because it was good business. I turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Oh, and those recipes you've been using, they're wrong. Grandma Rose never wrote down the real ones. She taught them to me through Maria. That's something else you never understood. Some things can't be bought or stolen. They have to be earned. The next 2 months were a flurry of activity. Jake tried to fight the eviction, but his investors pulled out when they saw the full picture. His premium business model had been hemorrhaging money for years, kept afloat only by his corporate salary and loans. Premium Books and Cafe closed quietly on a Sunday evening. No news crews this time, no fancy announcements, just a handwritten sign in the window. Thank you for your patronage. I turned the space into a community arts center, partnering with local schools and artists to create something the town actually needed. The true spirit of Grandma Rose's legacy. 1 year later, I sat in my original shop, now the flagship of a small but successful chain of community bookstores. Sarah came in with her kids, now teenagers but still eager to browse the shelves. I saw Jake the other day, she mentioned casually. He's taken a job in the city. Something about starting over. I nodded, thinking about the lesson my grandmother had taught me through all of this. Success isn't about destroying the competition. It's about building something meaningful that can't be destroyed. The bell above the door chimed, and I smiled as a new customer walked in. Time to focus on what really mattered. Creating more stories, more memories, more community. Jake had tried to teach me about business, but in the end, I taught him something far more valuable. Never underestimate someone who knows their true worth. The smell of cinnamon rolls wafted through the shop, made from Grandma Rose's real recipe, filled with love and tradition. Some victories, I'd learned, taste sweeter than others. And as I watched the sun set over my growing business empire, I couldn't help but smile. 10 years ago, Jake thought he was ending my story. Instead, he'd helped me write a better one.